Hello, everyone. We are back for another episode. And today I have with me Sonia Rodrigues. She is a licensed psychotherapist, an author, and founder of Transition to Wellness, which is a movement dedicated to helping women transform pain into purpose. Sonia empowers women to reclaim their worth, rebuild their lives, and rise into their most aligned, confident selves through coaching, writing, speaking, and transformative wellness programs. Her work blends clinical expertise, spiritual insight, and lived experiences, offering a holistic pathway to wholeness, clarity, and empowered leadership. So, Sonia, I'm super excited to have you on this episode, and we would love to hear more information of how you got to where you are.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me and for that introduction. I absolutely love being a therapist, and it's just been something that has just been very natural for me. I've always wanted to be in the helping profession. I've always been connected to other people, wanting to learn about patterns and why people do the things that they do, and really understanding the psychological components of why people function in the way that they do. So it's something that's always been super important to me. But most importantly, my work now is really centered towards working primarily with women. I do work with some men, but most of my work is really targeted towards really helping women navigate through difficult life transitions and move away from toxic relationships and helping them heal from those relationship patterns and really move into self-worth and having confidence in their abilities to find healthier relationships and really create the life that they desire.
I love that. So I'm curious of this because I feel like it's something that keeps coming up just a lot more. You mentioned as far as navigating from toxic relationships. Why are we finding that there's more women who are in these toxic and abusive relationships?
Good question, and it does seem to be quite common, right? I think that women are just naturally and inherently wanting to make things work and have a tendency to overfunction and be highly responsible and giving chances. And so I think that a lot of times some men will find women who are overly empathic and really just connected to making sure things work. I also think that women struggle to make decisions that require them to leave or break up their families,
Mhm.
or to leave a relationship where they really care about somebody and they really have hope. I think we often find ourselves in a position where we are giving everyone the benefit of the doubt or making excuses for them or saying one more chance or let me find you the help you need. I mean, even in my own experience, it was like, well, I can get you the resources. Let's get you
Mhm.
the support you need. Or they would say, I'm willing to make the changes, but then there's very limited follow through, right? Or, maybe they'll go to therapy and seek out support for several weeks, and then a few months later, they're right back to engaging in the same toxic patterns, right? And so I think that there's a desire sometimes for them to change, but it's not consistent and they don't follow through, or that there is a tendency for them to just tell you what you want to hear so that you don't leave the relationship and not necessarily be fully committed towards making the changes they need to make. But
Yeah.
I think women are just naturally givers and empathic and wanting to make things work and, giving things 100 chances. And so I think that's helpful sometimes, but also detrimental because we often do that so much that we deplete ourselves.
Yeah. Well, and that's a key thing right there because everybody wants the best for somebody else. Like women are those emotional beings, we lift each other up too. We want the best for other people. As a mom, I'm sure it's even harder to be in that space of not having your kids every day. So that's a thought that comes up. I know that was one of mine. Like the thought of not seeing my kid every day or having to choose, do we stay in this space where there's no growth, there's nothing moving, or do I like it had to come to a sacrificial, point. And I think you're right and you're spot on about a lot of things. Like women are definitely rising up into those higher duties and responsibilities. I could just take care of it myself. Might as well just get it done, instead of waiting on somebody else.
Absolutely. And in the meantime, we lose ourselves in the process and we don't
Yeah.
always recognize that we're doing that. But you brought up a really important point, and that's so hard. It's the reality of not seeing your kids every day, or the reality of knowing that they may be with their other parent, but their other parent is not necessarily as committed as you are because you've seen it in the relationship dynamic, right? And um, that's really hard. It's like knowing that here you are giving up the opportunity to see them every day and knowing that they're not necessarily going to be taken care of in the same way that you would have taken care of them.
Yeah. And that's even another struggle that brings up something else because every mom is going to be thinking about their kid. What are they thinking about over there? Am I missing my mom? I know I have that conversation with my kids too. Like, I know, and it's okay that you miss mommy when, you're with your dad. That's totally understandable for
Absolutely.
anybody, you know?
Hmm.
But I'm a phone call away. I'm here to have that conversation and just be able to reconnect. And I think that's another big thing that as we're healing and going through, the grief of what could have been or what we had desired, it's also a healing moment of I have to make myself connect and reconnect
Right.
instead of, vegging out.
Hmm. Absolutely. And
Yeah.
I think that the most important thing is to really talk through with your kids about ways that they can feel connected to you even when you're not present. And that could be, having a picture of you and them, doing something fun or memorable moment that they carry with them, or even just some small thing that they take that says, this reminds me of my mom, and I can hold on to it when I miss her, or knowing that that they can just call you, right? So I think that those things are so important. And then when you're without your kids, this is really where the true power comes in.
Yeah.
And one of the most healing moments is how do you really capitalize on that time to rebuild your life and to really do the things that you're so passionate about and the things that really allow you to grow and heal from this relationship, right? It's just how do you maximize that time?
Yeah. You brought up something. My daughter made me this little bracelet for
Oh, I
mommy.
love
And
it.
they have my kids have made me several different bracelets. Mommy, whenever, I'm not with you, I want you to wear this bracelet whenever. And I made one for them. So that way when we were apart, they had those things. They had that keepsake
Yes.
moment. That just made me think of that. And I'm like, we haven't worn those in a while either.
Absolutely, but those are exactly what I'm talking about. It's like, what are the keepsakes that you've made together, or something that's really meaningful for all of you, and how can they take it with them? And so I love that. That's so cute. Thank you for sharing that.
So, what are some of even in your clientele, and not to name anybody specific or anything like that, we want to honor that, but what are some of the common patterns that you see women come through that they're struggling with coming out of a toxic relationship?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's fascinating to see how sometimes they just flock to you with the same issue. And so I'll often say, we're going to all just meet in a group because we're all dealing with the same things. But most often it's that they're trying to make sense of a relationship or divorce or separation that just went south very quickly, or that they really just don't understand how the person that was in the relationship towards the end was anything like the person that they married or got together with, right? So massive change, or just like, I don't even know who this person is anymore. And how they often just lost themselves. They gave up all of the things that were important to them, and that they spent all their time and energy just trying to keep it together with this in this relationship dynamic. And so really just losing who they were and being able to step back and say, oh my gosh, like, how did I allow this to happen? Or
Yeah.
really reflecting on all of the red flags that were there that they, just kind of dismissed, or, really just didn't see as a big thing. Um, and oftentimes just how they would bring up things that were painful for them, or things that they were upset about, and they were easily gaslit. or dismissed. They're told that they were too much, or told that they're making a big deal out of nothing, or that their reaction, or or that it was their reaction that was really the problem, how they were reacting to things like lies and cheating and other toxic behaviors that were happening in the relationship, and how the woman was reacting became the problem, and how their anger or their frustration was the problem, and that they were the ones that needed to do the work on themselves. So really fascinating how the narrative had turned and how it became the woman's problem, even though
Yeah.
they were reacting naturally um, and emotionally to a lot of the things that were happening in the dynamic.
Yeah, they were reading their own intuition. I know a lot of clients, because even as a trauma healer in the work that I do too, like I'll have clients who come to me like, am I the crazy one? Am I the one who, like, what is wrong with me? Maybe I do need to work on me. Maybe, my partner's right. Maybe I'm the problem. And it can put you into that spiral of, is it me? Is it me? And you have to look back and even being where I am now, I look at other relationships and I look around me and I'm like, there's some things that I see and I'm like, did I, miss some markers? Like that is the me that I know and the me that I love, the me that I am would never tolerate some of these things. Like, and so it's just interesting watching it from my perspective now of even being divorced and separated and looking at other relationships. And I look at my partner now and I'm like, thank you for not doing that. Like, thank you for showing me different. Like, it's wild to me, even being, on this side of it. Do you find that there's a lot of ladies that come in repeating those same things? Like, am I the crazy one or anything of that nature?
Yeah, I mean, I don't, yeah, less so of like, am I the crazy one, but just like, I need help with my reaction, or, why am I responding in this way? Or, am I really asking for too much? Or, so
Mhm.
some of these things will come up often, just like, are my expectations too high? Is this, you know, is this just me, wanting too many things, or wanting too many expectations, or, is everyone else dealing with this? So I think that they are asking a lot of questions, but at the same time, there's a level of insight where they know that there's something off here, and they don't necessarily think it's entirely them, but they're just like, well, how do I work through this? And some of them, interestingly, will not really recognize all of the things that they put up with until they're out of it. And
Mhm.
so only reflecting back into the relationships will they say, wow, I can't believe that I put up with that, or I can't believe that I tolerated that. And when they're in it, they don't see like how crazy it is, or how it's really not aligned with who they are and their standards, but at the same time, they weren't able to see it clearly when they were in it.
So tell me, what would be some of those red flags, even for our listeners? What would be some of those things that we might tolerate but may not see?
Absolutely. The first and foremost is silence. And people will tell me that, they don't talk to each other for days when there's an argument.
You mean like
And
silent treatment? Like,
silent, yes,
okay,
exactly.
okay.
Silent treatment is a huge red flag. It's just not being able to talk through it. I mean, it's one thing to say, I just need a little time and space to process. Let's revisit this conversation, in a couple hours. But the silent treatment that lasts for days or sometimes a week is very much a red flag. We should not be in a home, especially where there are children, and there's the silent treatment going on for an extended period of time. It's not healthy.
Yeah.
And it's preferred that somebody is just saying, I need some space, I need some time, that you're verbalizing that, as opposed to just not communicating it. And then another red flag is really just any time that you express your emotions or feelings and they're being dismissed or minimized. And so you don't have to agree with a partner's emotions or feelings, but you do have to listen and validate them. And then you can say, I'm sorry that you're feeling that way. I see things a little bit differently, but I can understand that this is your viewpoint. And so really just some sort of validation of how you're feeling, and not dismissing and minimizing. And so that's another major red flag. And then
Okay.
certainly being able to come up with some sort of resolution when there's a conflict. And so if you feel like you're just bringing things up and there's never any kind of resolution, or the person just sits there and stares at you and shuts down, and there's never a resolution, that's certainly a red flag because there's going to be conflict or disagreements, but you need to be able to work through it and come up with some sort of response of how things are going to be different and what's the resolution to it. And so if you often feel like you're having the same arguments and there's never really a resolution, that's also a red flag. You can certainly go on, but I will give you those three.
Okay, I like that. And those are easy ones that people can recognize and what's going on, and they can also play into their day to day.
Yes.
Yeah. So that makes me curious though, even a step further. So if we're talking about those red flags, do you find that a lot of your clients come in with having either let go of boundaries or having dropped them or just unsure of how to create them in this kind of environment?
All of the above. I would say that a large number of people really don't understand the concept of setting a boundary and will often confuse that with being controlling or telling somebody what to do. And so, really needing to educate them on what a boundary is and that it's okay to set boundaries so that you're not feeling uncomfortable or dismissed or devalued in a relationship. And so, really just talking about the concept of boundaries and how important it is to have those discussions early on in any kind of relationship and not to just assume that the person that you're with, agrees with your boundaries. For example, one that often comes up is, having female friends or going out to for coffee or for a drink with a female friend. And, sometimes women are like, well, I don't want to tell them they can't have female friends, but at the same time, this makes me highly uncomfortable. And then they don't say anything. And so, really important for them to have those discussions and set parameters around what that looks like. Maybe you're going out with a friend, but it's not by yourselves, or maybe there's always a group of people, right? Or, maybe you're not going out late at night with this person. Maybe you just grab a cup of coffee, during the day with them, right? So, whatever makes them feel comfortable, they need to learn how to have those discussions. And I think there's a lot of fear around coming across as being controlling and
Mhm.
not wanting to say what their boundary is, what their boundaries are, or that they feel uncomfortable, so they don't say anything. And so I think it's super important to recognize that, boundaries are not control, but it's about how do you protect yourself and ensure that you're all on the same page.
Yeah. A lot of times I'll have clients come in and one of the biggest things when boundaries come up, I always tell them it's not you're not telling somebody else what they are going to do. They have free will, they are free to do whatever it is that they want. It is only saying what you will and will not allow and what you'll tolerate versus what you want. So it's kind of, I had a conversation with a client one time. It's like, we're having a discussion around something that their partner did. And I was like, hey, if this continues or if this is how our conversations start to go down this way, that I'm going to have to step aside. I'm not going to be engaged in this conversation anymore until we can have a healthy communication point. And sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. I work with a lot of clients and the same thing, toxic relationships or have been out of it for years, have been on the other side, have, been remarried or moved into new relationships, and they're finding some of those same patterns still pop up. Not necessarily same people all the time or, types, but their patterns keep showing up.
Sure. And sometimes it's on the other
Yeah.
side as well that they're finding, that certainly happened to me where I'm like, why am I attracting this same kind of person? And what is it about me? And I really had to do my own personal work to say, like, I need to set boundaries. I need to stop overgiving. I need to stop overfunctioning. I need to stop giving people 1,000 chances, right? And that was something I had to really learn too. Prior to doing this work, I was like, okay, well, why am I attracting the same pattern, right? So I think that that's important and it goes both ways. And so patterns are so important. I really work from the perspective of attachment theory. and really understanding your attachment style and your partner's attachment style can just be an enormous help when you're trying to understand relationship dynamics. So I highly recommend that everyone, find out what their attachment style is and the attachment style of the people that they tend to attract, right? And so for me in my own journey, I kept attracting avoidant personality types. And that was really painful for me because I really just wanted to communicate. I wanted to talk through things. I wanted to express myself openly. And I just kept hitting walls, and avoidance and the silent treatment. And I said, wow, what am I doing that I'm continuously getting myself into these situations, right? And so I had to make sure I could do the work. And right now, I can spot somebody with an avoidant attachment style so fast, like
Yeah.
a couple of minutes. And I'm just like, okay, so I've learned that this is not for me. It's not somebody that works well with me because I really value the communication and the openness and um, the intimacy. And, I really struggle with someone who's avoidant because I want to address things in the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even and like you said earlier, if there is a moment of, hey, can we take a step back? Can we like recircle in a couple of hours? I just need some
Right.
space to process. That's totally fine. My biggest rule, even, when I started dating after divorce, it was just like, as long as we communicate, everything's fine. You stop
Mhm.
communicating, there's an issue. And I kind of developed my own thing of like rules and standards and expectations. What are the expectations in this relationship? What are your expectations of a partner? What are mine? And like, let's come together and have that discussion. And I had my standards. These are things I will allow, these are things I won't allow. And then I had my rules. These are and I mean, they're the basics of things, but I'm not gonna, like, you're not gonna treat me like garbage. You're not gonna call me names. Like, that's not a relationship. And so I set those rules and standards and boundaries and everything. And I was like, okay, man, we got a bar up here, you know? But it kept me in a space of constantly checking myself. Well, am I honoring these things that I've created or am I letting them slide?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's so important because many people don't have those conversations, and there's a lot of just expectations. So I'm just expecting that this person's going to treat me this way, or I'm expecting that this person knows what I want. And that's not true. You need to set those guidelines and those expectations, and it's so important. And so I think that that's a wonderful framework for people to go on to have a healthy relationship and to determine, is this a good fit? Are we on the same page? So
Yeah.
I love that you do that.
Yeah. Do you find that most women come to you still being stuck in the relationship, or do they come to you after having already exited?
Most often, I will see them after they've already exited,
Okay.
but they're still trying to make sense of it. They're looking for closure. They're trying to make sense of what happened, or, where did I go wrong here? And so, very often, it's, trying to pick up the pieces after the fact. Yeah.
Okay. Do you have a rebuilding framework and method that you walk them through when they come see you?
Yes. I'm just launching a reclaim method where they reclaim their power and their self-worth. And so it's something that I'm actually looking to launch in a couple of weeks and looking to have a group program where I utilize this approach.
Okay, awesome. Can you tell us a little bit more about your approach?
Sure. And so I think it's really important again to establish the patterns, right? Really look at the pattern for themselves and the pattern in the partners that they tend to choose. And so really understanding that from an attachment focused approach. And then we also will talk about love languages and what their love languages are and what they feel most connected to. So we'll have conversations about that. We'll certainly look at dynamics centered around how they were treated in their childhood home and whether or not there's some healing that needs to happen from childhood wounds and that they're bringing into their relationship. And then we will take a look at what kind of life and relationship they want for themselves now and what does that look like, and what areas there might be gaps in for them to work on for themselves in order to set the boundaries that they need to set, and what they feel like they deserve, right? And so how do we get them to a place where we can say, we're not going to settle for anything less than this, and
Yeah.
really being clear about what their guidelines are, what their rules are, what their boundaries are, and then moving them into, how do I find this person, and then um, how do I identify somebody who's not a good fit for me quickly so that I'm not wasting a lot of time. And so a lot of times what will happen is the women will say, I really am nervous about going back out there because, I just feel like I don't want to be disappointed again, or I don't want to get hurt again. And so really helping them understand that when they are really clear on what their boundaries are and what the patterns are, that they can identify things very quickly, and that they don't need to be stuck in these situations again because they've eliminated the option, because they're much more aware of what a red flag looks like, much more aware of what they're looking for, and they don't settle for anything less than that.
I love that. It sounds like you're also supporting them in becoming the partner that they're desiring to attract.
Yes.
I like that. How do you help them to see that this is something that they deserve? That this is a level of life that they deserve, not something that they have to feel like they have to suffer again or anything of that nature.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really important to get them to a place where they can recognize that having a relationship is not something they need, but it's something that they want, and that they are doing well on their own, and that they don't need something right now. They don't need to settle for it in the moment. So really getting them to a place where they love their own life and the life that they've designed for themselves, so that they don't feel like I need to have a partner, right?
Yeah.
It's like, well, you're already doing the work. You've got your own home, you've got your career, you're thriving, you've got these hobbies, you've got a great friend group, that this would be a nice benefit and add on to your life. And really getting them to a place where they build the life that they desire for themselves outside of a relationship dynamic, right? And so, how do we independently create the confidence and the life you want so that you're not saying to yourself, I really need to have this relationship. You say, I want a relationship, but I also want it to be aligned with who I am and what I deserve, right? And so a lot of this self-worth work comes from a place of, I don't need to settle because this is what I'm worth. And so you really have to do that independently outside of a relationship. And so how do we rebuild them so that they can feel confident in what they have to offer somebody?
Yeah. And that's empowering in and of itself because you get the power. It's like all the power comes back to you. You get to choose.
Yes,
Is this for me? Are you going to be a disrupting of my time? Are you going to support my time?
yeah,
And just it, there's a freedom and an empowerment piece there. I love
absolutely.
that.
And it's my favorite piece of really getting them to see, like, you don't need to go somewhere and feel like, oh, choose me, I really want somebody to look at me or pay attention to me. It's who's worthy of my time,
Yeah.
right?
Who
And
is
so that's
worthy
a
of
major
sitting at my
shift.
table?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Who's worthy of my time? And so um it's so powerful and it's so amazing to watch, but really, getting moving them from that, like, I just, I want somebody to care for me and love me. And then I'll stop them and say, yes, but you want the right person to do that. And you want to make sure that it's someone who can offer you the kind of life that you love and life that you deserve.
Yeah. I always ask my clients, whenever we get into, and even my kids, when my kids, I always tell them, number one, when boys pick on you, it's not because they like you. Like, don't fall for that. That is not what we're falling for anymore. And just telling them, like, asking them, are even your friends, are they kind? Do they treat you with respect? Or do they want you to do things for them? And so, even showing them in relationships and friendships, this is what's tolerable, this is what's not. This is where we take our power back and we say, and I have a thing, one of my daughters is going through it now, and I keep telling her, like, just tell your friends, hey, if you're not going to be kind, I don't want to play. This is not what I want to do. And I said, that goes back on you. You're not being mean. You're not saying, I don't like you. You're mean. You're not pointing fingers. You're just saying what I'm willing and not willing to do.
Right. And that's so powerful. And so many parents really need to take that approach because that's really where the work happens is if they're learning this at a young age, that they don't really have to settle and that they don't need a friend who's not going to be kind to them. I say this all the time. I just had a client over the weekend who said to me, I don't want to say anything that will, cause my friends to not want to be with me or cause them to judge me. And I had to really work with her and say, well, then they're not really your friends because if they're getting to a place where you're being judged or they don't like what you're saying and they're going to detach from you, then that's not somebody who's should be in your circle, right? And that you don't want the wrong friends, that you want to make sure that you're aligning yourself with people who are supportive of you, who are committed to you, and who are not judgmental of who you are. But also it's okay to have feedback, right? So obviously if something is happening in the friendship dynamic, they have the ability to explain it to you, but you also don't want to be in a place where you're constantly fearful that if you're being yourself or if you're sharing things that they're going to leave you.
Yeah. Do you find that some of your clients also have similar friendships that are in the same red flag category?
At times, yeah, patterns are patterns, right? And they will show up in so many different ways. And I think what's most prevalent is a work environment where somebody will say, "Oh my gosh, like my boss brings up these things that my partner does," right? So, there's a lot of similar dynamics there. And so really recognizing, well, how do you need to show up differently in this work dynamic or with a friendship situation and your relationship? And what's the pattern telling you, right? Because the patterns will show up. And I think it's so empowering when they can see what the pattern is and how they can shift it because we can't shift how other people act, but we can shift and tolerate and say what we're willing to tolerate, right?
Yeah. And how we respond.
Yeah,
You can only be in control of you, your
right.
actions, your words, your
Yeah.
behaviors, all those things.
And what we allow, right? Because that's the
Yeah.
big thing. It's like, well, what are you going to allow into your life? And how are you going to stop this behavior? Or how are you going to let somebody know that this is not okay?
Yeah. So some of the good question that you just said, like, how am I going to stop this behavior? So if we have some listeners out there right now who are in the middle and they're in the thick of it, what are some encouraging things that you can tell them to either repattern or to give them just some awareness in the space of what's best for them versus what isn't? Because I know we can't make that decision no matter
Sure.
what, can't make that decision for somebody else, but giving them that encouragement and support to guide them in that right direction for themselves.
Yeah, great question. I think what's really powerful is being able to just say, this doesn't feel good. This isn't okay. I don't like how I'm feeling right now. I don't like how you're speaking to me. I don't like how this is presenting itself to me, and just really just indicating that you don't like how something is, and or being able to say this is not okay. Or even just saying I have to walk away from this conversation right now because it's not moving in a positive direction, or this conversation doesn't make me feel good. I need to walk away from it. Right. So really, again, it's really part of the boundaries. It's really learning and educating yourself about what are healthy boundaries that you can set. All right. I really don't feel like having this conversation with you because I feel like I'm being put down, or, I don't feel like we're in a good place to have this conversation because we both need to calm down. So any of those things can be very helpful, but it's really centered around indicating that you don't feel comfortable about the dynamic that's currently happening. You need to either step away from it or they need to shift how they're responding to you or speaking to you.
Yeah. And I like that you say that. It's just putting them the power back and voicing themselves. And I think so many women who have been trapped in these situations or have just lived through toxic relationships and abusive partners, it's a moment of silence. They just go silent. It's easier to stay quiet than it is to speak up.
Right.
And then in that moment, you start having more health issues, you're having more anxiety because you're bottling everything up. You're going to a place of, I mean, I've even had clients have thyroid problems from inability to, if you're looking at the metaphysical relationship to it, there's an inability to express and to voice yourself. So finding where that voice is and giving yourself that power to say, it's okay that I don't feel okay.
Yeah, and the power of the voice and that whole intertwining of your body and your physical ailments showing up when there's trauma and stress and anxiety. It's a major thing. And so a lot of people will go to doctor and after doctor trying to figure out, what's going on with their bodies and never really tying it to what's happening from an emotional perspective or relational
Yeah.
perspective and how it's connected. Inflammation, is something I personally struggled with when I was under so much stress and in these toxic relationships. My body was constantly inflamed and I was struggling with weight loss and looking at myself and saying like, what is going on? Like, I'm not eating differently. I'm still exercising. I'm still really paying attention to what I'm eating. And the reality of it was just my cortisol levels were just, through the roof, where I was in constant fight or flight, like, what's going to come up next? And it was like this constant chaos of, you know, what do I need to be prepared for? And so women aren't necessarily tying those together. A lot of the
Yeah.
women I've worked with have autoimmune issues.
Yep. I was just
And
about to bring that up.
yeah, it's so connected. I mean, it really is. Tied to how we're feeling. There's a massive emotional and physical component. And I know you and I have talked quite a bit about that. And
Yeah.
so important for people to recognize that they need to really release the trauma that's stored in the body.
Yeah.
It's a powerful thing. And if they're having the physical issues, it's a wonderful reminder to say, well, what else is going on in my life that I need to change, not just medicate.
Yeah. There's so many different research articles out there too, and different books, and even some that I have read that it's been like, oh, this environment has triggered this. That's crazy. And even being in different relationships that were not suitable for me, even in the past, I could see looking back where my health would take a turn. And like, of course, I had to look back at those things. It was not a connection point at that time. It was what is going on with my body and why are we acting this way? Like, help me out. But over time, started looking at it. And I even had a client one time that every time her spouse would go through different addiction issues, it would relapse their autoimmune NMS symptoms. And there is a book that actually talks about a lot of those things. I cannot remember the name of it right now. I think it's When the Body Says No, but it talks a lot about, different situations that it was almost like it was re-traumatizing all over again in those same environments.
Yeah, absolutely. And another book is called When the Body Keeps the Score.
Yeah.
That's another one as well that
Yeah.
really talks about the intersection of, trauma that's stored in the body and how it manifests. So super important for people to recognize that there truly is a connection.
Yeah. And we're all connected. So even when we're in that environment, you find when you hear one person talk about it and then, you hear somebody else and then you hear somebody else. So it's like you end up in the environment of connecting with all these people and now you're building that support system as well. Do you find that some people come in and they're getting stuck in these loops of, toxic partners and they're like scrolling on social media, looking at the negative side of things? Do you ever find that it's helpful to shift them over to the positive side?
Do you mean the negative side of the relationship and shifting them to the positive side of what it's doing for them?
Yeah, so like there's certain I find even with some of my clients. So like if it's narcissistic partners, they'll go down a rabbit hole of reading all things about narcissistic partners, all these things and they're like, "Yes, agree, agree, agree." And it's just nothing, it keeps them in that negative loop.
Right.
And I find where, sometimes I'm shifting them, like find other things to look at. Find other things that are going to be supportive on the positive side. Do you
Yeah,
find that that's another thing in your clinic as well, or even in your coaching?
yeah, for sure that they will have a tendency to just try to make sense of it and understand it. But the other piece of it that's sometimes missing is how do I get out of here? Or, am I willing to deal with this and how can I best deal with it in a positive way, right? What are the tools that I need, right? And so understanding it and the dynamics is part of it, but overly consuming yourself with the content, it doesn't move you forward. It is not necessarily helpful. So I think it needs to be a combo of, hey, I can understand that this is what might be happening for me, or here's what I'm seeing. But then the secondary component needs to be, okay, what am I going to do with this? And, am I just educating myself and not going to do anything about it? Or is there something that I want to change about the dynamic that I'm in, right?
Mm.
And
I
I
like,
think what people forget, one of the hardest things is that people don't always realize that they truly have the power to change their dynamic. You can't change their partner, but you can change the pattern and the dynamic, right? And you can really say, if I respond differently, then this person's either going to have to respond differently or we're going to terminate or end the relationship, right? But I think it's important for people to not get stuck in the I can't change this no matter what I do, nothing changes, right? We have to start saying, what can I do to change my dynamic?
and I think that's where, I love that you say that because I feel like that's where most people get lost or they lose themselves. They're spiraling in a space of this is where I'm at, this is where I'm at, this is where I'm at, this is where I'm at. And there is no, okay, what's on the other side? Because I don't think half the time they can see those things.
Right.
When you're in the thick of it, you don't always see what's on the other side of it because this is all you know. And especially if it's something that came from childhood too, you're just replaying the next pattern that this is how it is, this is how it must be.
Right, right. And, granted, I recognize that a big part of what keeps women stuck is finances. And sometimes they just automatically say, well, I can't survive on my own. And they just shut it down. And what I would love for them to be able to do is to say, well, what does a plan look like? Do I maybe get a part-time job and start putting money aside? Do I start asking family for some money? Do I really start looking at whatever free resources are out there so that I can leave? Can I start somehow putting some money aside for, when I'm ready to leave, right?
Yeah.
Um, and again, not everybody can leave, and I recognize that, or sometimes it takes years for somebody to be able to leave. But the other piece is what can I do so that I don't get lost here? What can I do so that I'm not giving up who I am, right? And maybe that looks like you still live in the same home, but you create your separate life and you're not allowing their behavior to drastically impact your health and your emotional well-being, but you just say, well, they're going to do what they want to do and I'm going to live my separate life, right? Whatever it takes to be able to say I'm not going to lose myself in the process.
Yeah.
I'm not going to allow it to take over my emotional health and my physical health, and I'm going to have a plan so that I don't feel like I'm stuck in this situation forever. Right?
Yeah. That was one of my biggest things, even in different relationships in the past. It was basically just living my own life. How can I live this different?
Mhm.
And imagining what would life be like if I could wave a magic wand and have it however I wanted? What would I be doing? And then I just acted and started doing those things.
That's great. And so many people don't even have that vision.
Yeah.
I'll always ask that question. What does your dream life look like? What would it look like if you were truly happy and felt peaceful and connected? And they don't know. So I think that that's always the biggest barrier is like you have to have that vision for what that looks like. And once you have that vision, we can create the steps to get you towards that. But if you don't know what that looks like, they're so disconnected from it. It's hard to think about how do you get there?
Yeah. I have a lot of clients that come in the same way, and I'm like, okay, start telling me the things you don't like right now. And then let's imagine the opposite.
Yeah.
What would it feel like instead?
Hmm.
And that shifts them from, and I'll make them write it down in column A, things we hate right now, things we
Right.
just don't like. And then column B, what would you want instead? Even down to how you're hearing praises, how you're getting, I don't know, like my partner bought me some flowers over the weekend. Has never been a thing. I've always loved that. Always loved flowers. So it was something new and different. And I was just like, oh, yes,
So
thank you.
great.
It was
Yeah.
just one of those moments. It was just like, oh, I am important. Thank you. But
Yes.
it's, well receiving those things. Because I think a lot of times when you're imagining what you would like, you can't even imagine receiving it,
Mhm.
So being in that space of receptivity as well as that vision. And then
Right.
it burns. It starts burning and yearning, and that passion gets louder and louder and louder.
Yeah. And one of the things I'll often say is, start with giving it to yourself. Go to the store and buy flowers. I buy flowers for myself every week. Do that for yourself. And you really start building that momentum of like, I deserve this. And if there isn't someone actively here to do it for me, I will do it for myself, right? But that you're creating this sense of worthiness, right? Like I deserve that and I enjoy that. So let me make sure I can do that for myself, right?
Yeah.
And it's like,
So,
hey, if you can't buy a whole bouquet, just buy one. Or
yeah.
go out and pick flowers. We're in spring, but
Yeah.
we have to really think outside the box sometimes and say, like, okay, yeah, I would love it for somebody to give me flowers. And I'll put that out there in the universe and I have to be confident that one day somebody's going to do that. But
Yeah.
for right now, I'm gonna just go and create a bouquet for myself.
Yeah. And that's what I would do. And we even had the conversation in the past about buying flowers. And I'm like, well, flowers do die, but there's also rose bushes out here. And for whatever reason, they had these little bugs on them. And I was like, "Ugh, I can't even go pick my own roses out of the rose bush because I'm going to bring bugs in and I'm not bringing bugs in." And then on just this past week, he was just like, here you go.
So
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you. What an honor.
And that's really great too because you are a clear reflection of someone who has left a toxic relationship and has now found something that is really healthy and meaningful for you.
Yeah. Being in that space of just not having partners that were in the space that I wanted. Like, this is not my ideal of a relationship. And it's been several. Like, I was in that train of here's the next one, here's the next one, and just not enjoying where I was and how I was. So, how can I make this better? It started with me, just like you're saying here. How can I make myself better first and shift the dynamic and give myself the relationship I do desire?
Yeah. And then it came.
And then it came. And then
See?
it came.
To all the listeners out there, it does happen.
Here's your hope. So what is for before we start talking about, how people can find you, what is one message you want to give to the audience right now who's listening?
I want to tell them all that they can change their life and that if there's any part of their life that they're unhappy with, to think of one small step that they can do today that would move the needle forward, that would move them towards feeling like, hey, I'm doing something about this, right? The other thing I want to share is that if you just Google the 8 dimensions of wellness, it's one of the best tools I use in my work with my clients, is that in order for us to truly live a happy, healthy life, we really need to spend time on all of the dimensions of wellness, right? It's like our spiritual and religious practices, our career and work life, our friendships and our relationships, right? There's so many parts of ourselves that we need to make sure we're taking care of. And it can feel overwhelming. But I would say to just pick two different dimensions that you want to focus on every week and alternate them, and pick one or two things that you can do that really helps you feel like you're moving towards creating wellness for yourself in those different dimensions of your life. And to try not to give up the things that are important to them or lose themselves in a relationship. So,
I love that. And that last piece right there, don't lose yourself. Put yourself first. I love that. All right, my girl, tell everybody where they can find you, how they can get connected to you and get some further support from you.
sure, thank you so much. So you can certainly check out my website, transition2wellness.com. I'm also available on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook under transition.2.wellness, and happy to connect with anyone there as well. You can also follow me in my profile on Psychology Today at Sonia Rodrigues, and I look forward to connecting with all of you.
All right. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being here today. And we will catch you guys on the flip side.
Thank you so much.